What up? WINBUSH here, and today we're going to start with our wall break. I already have a scene built out here. It's just with generic shapes. So I have our cube, which is going to be our wall. I have a plane for the ground. I have a plane for the background, and then I have a spline that I already drew out here, and that's basically where our wall break is going to be at. And then just for the textures, I just use a generic reference size, which is pretty much just this here. I could throw this up on my Facebook, or I could set up a Gumroad if you guys want to follow along with the project. I could put this project file up there for you guys. But yeah, I just keep these on hand because they're good for texturing. And so yeah, I just have these generic grids here, and that's what we're going to be working with right now because it's all about breaking this wall. So to get started, I'm going to go over to MoGraph, come down to Voronoi fracture, then put our cube under there. And as you can see, it fractures it right away, but these are huge chunks. This isn't what we want. We want something that's going to go along our spline line there, because we're going to just want specific areas of the rock to break to bring out that realism. And so let's click over to our Voronoi fracture. We're going to want to add more chunks. And let me do this. I'll bring this up in my attribute manager. So now you can see what I'm doing here. Follow along. So like I said, clicked on Voronoi fracture, and this menu pops up, and under sources, we'll have a point generator. Now there's several ways you could do this. The point generator is the one that comes up by default, and you'll just come down here to point amount, and let's add 100. See what that's going to look like. So hit 100, enter, and you can see our fractures are even smaller, but we want to go even smaller than that. Let's try out 500, and we see we're getting some pretty good sizes in there. Now we'll want to add some dynamics to this to make everything fall. So if I go over to click over any fracture, go to tags, come down to simulation tags, and use a rigid body. And then if I click play, you can see everything is starting to break apart, but not really how we want. The whole wall is just going to break. And that's because over here under trigger, we have immediately selected. That's by default. And that's just going to make everything start colliding. Oh, the part I didn't show you guys, I'm sorry. I already had collider tags on here. Let me delete these. If I come over to my plane, that's going to be my floor. Actually, I could just name it floor. And then name this one back wall. Now I can select these both and then go over into tags, go into simulations, and go to collider body this time. And that way, whenever we activate our dynamics, the floor and the back wall is not going to fall. They're going to be basically there just for stuff to collide with. Now let me knock our point amount down so it moves a little bit faster. I can show you guys what that looks like. So let's go back down to 100. Let's click play. And you can see everything's just starting to break apart, which is cool, but that's not what we're going for. So what we're going to want to do is, let me see, come back to our Voronoi fracture. Let's put this back up to 500. And let's add our effector. So we want to come over to MoGraph, Effector, and go down to just a random effector. And as you can see, it's starting to make everything go crazy. That's because our Falloff is on infinite. We're going to want to make it into a box. And that way we can have it control just certain areas in here. And by default, our parameters, let me see, our parameters are going to be 50, 50, 50. That's going to be way too much for what we want to do. We basically just want to use this random effector to activate some of the chunks. That way they'll start colliding into each other and start falling. And so we just want small numbers. Let's start with like 5, 5. Let's say -10. Actually, let me see. Yeah, so if we do like -10, that should give it a good amount to just start activating our rocks that we want. And to be able to have it travel along our path that we have here, we'll want to go over to tags, come over to cinema 4D, and then do align the spline. And then we want to click on our spline. Actually, let me just change this to spline travel. There we go. So we know what we're working with. So I'll click on my spline tag and go to spline path. Bring that down here, and you can see our box automatically jumps to the beginning of our spline here. And this box is going to be way too big. If I come over to my position here in my attributes, if I start scrolling my position, it's going to affect all this area, and that's not what we really want. We want it to just affect a small area along the path. So let's bring this back down to 0. We're going to make our random effector smaller. So I'm going to click on my random, and then my attributes window, go over to Falloff. And now this is where I'm going to change the sizing over here under size. So let's start with like 30. So 30, 30, 30. We could probably even do 30, 30, 20. There we go. And then let's go to our quad view, see where we're at. So as we travel along, we just want it to really clip the wall. We don't want it to hit the whole wall unless that's what you really want. But for my example, I just want it to clip the front of the wall. And so, well, actually, let's just play it back and see what it looks like. So I'm gonna go over to my random and click on my align the spline tag, and under position, I'm gonna click here, make a keyframe. Let's move it up 120 frames, take it up to 100%. There we go. Hit our keyframe again. Now let's see what happens. Oh yeah, it's going to start before anything happens. That's because I didn't change out my trigger here. So I have to go over to my Voronoi fracture. Let's see my attributes window. So I'm gonna click on my dynamic body tag, and under trigger, well, let's do it this way. Let's do on collision, because I can show you, this is what most people do. So we'll click on collision. I'll show you what happens there. So now let's click play. And you can see as our random effector is traveling through our wall, what on collision does is as soon as something starts colliding and it gets hit, everything just starts reacting with it, which in some cases works, but in this case is not what we really want. So let's stop our playback. Let's go back, and I'm gonna pull this up again, go under trigger. Now let's go at velocity peak. Now this is what I found gave me the results that I wanted when I was playing around with it. Now let's see what happens whenever we play it. See, when you hit velocity peak, I don't know the math or science behind it, but it allows it to take certain chunks and just work with those. And we have our holes here. We still have some of our rocks intact there, and that starts looking pretty cool. It looks natural. Let's see if I move my spline out a tad bit more. Let's see, because I only want it to really clip the front. And if I look at my top view here, I can see that our fall off is just clipping the front here. So I'm actually gonna eliminate the fall off altogether. So I'm gonna go back to my random, pull up this window so you guys can see it. So I'm gonna go up to my random, fall off, and I'm just gonna go fall off here down to 0%. And you can see when I'm moving this fall off here, it's making our red box go in and out. So we just want it to be 0%. We don't really need a fall off there. And then let's see what happens now when we hit playback. So a few more rocks pretty much gave us the same results. What we could do now is go back to Voronoi fracture, and under, oops, go to our attribute window. Where we at? Okay, so I want to go back to our Voronoi fracture. We're going to take our point amount. Let's make it 1,000 to give us even more fractures. Now let's see what our results look like. So that's looking pretty cool there. Happy with those results. And now, instead of having our entire wall fractured, now there's several ways of doing this. The quickest way I found to do what I'm about to show you is, let's go over to our glue geometry. Now what I'm going to want to do is our top portion here, I'm going to want to try to make this one chunk, and our bottom portion here one chunk, and then our affected fractures are going to be along the path there. So a way to do that is go over to our Voronoi fracture, geometry glue, enable our glue, and then our fall off here, our glue type, we're going to keep fall off, and we're going to go add glue fall off, and we'll see over here in our objects panel, now we have a fall off. And whenever you do that, it makes our whole thing solid. So let's hit playback. You can see nothing's being affected because it's gluing everything together. Now to get around that, we'll want to click our fall off over here in our object window, and then over here under fall off, sorry, I'm trying to bring this up in the middle so you guys can see what's going on. So over here in fall off, for a shape, again, we're going to want to use a box, and whenever I clicked on box, you can see it automatically starts affecting our wall. It makes a bigger chunk. I'm going to bring my fall off down, don't really need it that wide. Now I'm going to make it the length of the box, and now we have a huge chunk that we can work with. So I'm just going to bring this down right below our path because I don't want this to be affected by our random effector. So I'm going to bring this down a tiny bit more, and then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go to our Voronoi fracture in our attributes window here where it says fall off, and we'll add glue fall off again, and then just go through the same technique that we just did. Click on our new fall off shape, bring down a box, and then I'm going to bring this up. You don't need as much fall off, so I'm going to grab this, bring it out, and then make it the length of the box. So now we have our top solid section, we have a bottom solid section, and then we have the sections of the wall that are going to be affected. And actually I could change, I'm going to change my spline a little bit here. So I'm going to click on my spline, come over to my left where it says points, click on that, then I'm just going to select this point. I'm going to bring it up a tiny bit more, and then I'm going to bring this down. I'm just changing out my path a little bit here, and then click back on my model mode, and then that way, it's because I want to make these chunks a little bit bigger, so I'm going to bring my fall off down, then my other fall off I'm going to bring up a little bit, and then that way hopefully it's only going to affect what's happening in the middle. So let's hit play, bam, and there we go. So that's how we get that effect there. It's only affecting the middle of the rocks. And again, if we want even more dynamics, if we want it to look more dynamic, click on a Voronoi fracture, go to sources, point generator, and just depends on your computer how much you can handle. Get on the point amount, let's do 1500 this time. Now let's see what it looks like. So that looks pretty cool there. And that's basically how we get our wall to rip out in the middle there. Now somebody had asked me before too how to get the top part to kind of fall down. So it's like we have our initial wall rip there, and then we want the rest of the wall to be affected. So we can do that again with effectors. So I'm going to click on my Voronoi fracture, go under mode graph, and this time I'm going to add a plane effector. And you see as soon as I did that, made everything jump up. So I'm just going to go over here again, come to my attributes, click on my plane, and for my fall off again, I'm going to use a box. And this time I'm just going to make the box really thin because I want to use the box this time just to kind of activate that top section. So I'm going to move it until, let's see, I'm going to move it until it just starts to move that top section there. There we go. That's a little bit dramatic. Let me come under my parameters and let's see. Let's just make this like 5. And then now let's pull it up. So now when I'm pulling it up, you can see it's raising it just a tiny bit. We don't want it to make a huge jump. we want it to move up just enough to make it react. So here we go, maybe 3, and then we can bring out maybe -15 for the Z. See what that looks like. And if we want to rotate it a little bit, maybe make it rotate forward. It's not gonna. Okay, so for a middle rotation, maybe 15. Then I'm just gonna make this the length of our box. Now let's see again whenever it's playing back. So we have our random effector going through. So let's say around maybe frame 80 might be a good time to activate this top part. So I'm gonna go back to my plane. I'm gonna move it backwards so it's not affecting the wall. And then I'm gonna come over here, and for my Z space, I'm going to go under coordinates. Let's say 125. I like working with even numbers, so I'm gonna keyframe that, and then maybe move it ahead. Let's say 140, maybe. Okay, so I'm in 140 in my timeline. I'm gonna grab my plane effector, move it through the wall, and then add another keyframe. Okay, now let's play it back, see what this looks like. Yeah, so as you saw, it made the wall fly way back during the scene. And I can fix that. Let's go to I like using this technique when I'm using dynamics. I can kind of control where the breaks are going. So I'm gonna make a cube, and I'm gonna use this cube as a collider body. So I'm gonna make it smaller. I'm just gonna bring it up to the back of it. Make it the length of the wall. Make it a little bit longer. And that way, whenever it hits, it's not gonna fly backwards. Now on my cube, I'm gonna go under tags, simulation tags, and go under collider body, like we did for our floor and our back wall. And then, so we don't see this in our scene, I'm gonna go back to my tags again, come down to Cinema 4D, go to display, and that way, I can kind of control how this looks in my scene. So our display tag, if I click on this first one, this is shading mode, I can actually come down and make it into lines. So I can still see where my box is at, but it makes it transparent. And then whenever you're ready to render, you can actually come down to here where it says visibility, and you just make that 0, and then that makes it invisible in your scene altogether, and it won't be seen in your render. But for now, while we're working on our wall break, I want to see it. And so let's click play, see how this is going to look. So you have rocks falling, and now when it happens, it looks like our top part is flying forward. So I'm just going to come over to my cube. I'm on PC. I'm going to hold control, left click, drag down, and that's going to make a duplicate. And this is why I wanted to see where my cubes are at, because I can bring it forward and I can still see it in my viewport. So I'm gonna bring it forward to about there. Then I'm going to do another duplicate, and I'm gonna bring one up above just in case it wants to fly off top. So I'm going to make another collider box up top here, so nothing's going to fly up here. Now let's play it back, see what it looks like. Now it's running off the side. So it might be something with my plane effector. Let's see, in my parameters, instead of having it rotate forward by 15, maybe just 5. And then my Z, maybe let's just do -5. Oops. Now let's play it back. And this is part of dynamics, just kind of, R&D in, playing around, see what works until you get something you're happy with. So now it's not flying forward anymore, but it's getting stuck on our collider boxes. So maybe let's do -10, see what this looks like. I'm not gonna take my other box. Let's move this up a tiny bit. Okay. Play it through again. Okay, so that's not what we really want. So let's make another collider box. This time I'm going to bring it over to the side since that seems to be where it wants to keep flying off to. So I'm going to bring this cube over to the side here. Let's play back. There we go. So now it's starting to fall forward, but it's not going to look natural because it's hitting a wall. It's going to look like it's hitting a force field. So what we could do is we can actually control the movement of our collider boxes. So let's play back to kind of see when it starts to react. So it looks like around 93-ish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my box that's here in the front and I'm going to keyframe it out. So let's make it 24. So I'm going to keyframe my Z space and then maybe move it ahead up to, let's say 120. Now let's just move this forward a little bit. Oops, I did that wrong. I keyframed the wrong spot. Alright, so I'm going to go back to 92, Control Z, get my coordinates. Here we go. So my Z, keyframe that, come up to 140. I'm going to move my box, keyframe it again, and then let's make this invisible again. Okay, now let's do playback, see what happens. See, so that's not bad there. It looks like we have a little chunk up here that's not being affected. So what I could do is I'll take my Falloff, extend it even further. There we go. So now we don't have no more chunk. It's all solid up there. Hopefully it didn't affect our simulation too much. Run another test. And yeah, it looks like it did. Let's Control Z. Let's see. So I wonder if I bring my plane, if I make it taller maybe. So let's try this. I took my plane effector and I made it taller. So let's see what happens now. God, it actually looks a lot better. So as you can see, it's just a lot of playing around. Until you get something that you're happy with. Now for the last part of this video, I'm actually just going to show you how you can texture this stuff out so that our outside wall looks different than the chunks when it's broken open. And that's why I wanted to use these texture grids, because let's say for the outside of the wall, I'm using Redshift, so I'm just going to use a generic material. Let's say our preset, let's make it plastic. And then we can bring down a reflective weight a little bit. So I'm just going to rename this RS wall. And then Voronoi fractures. What's cool about Voronoi fracture is you can come over here to selections. So I have Voronoi fracture selections, and it gives us all these different selections in here that we can select. So we have our inside faces. We're going to click that, and you can see on our Voronoi fracture, it gave us a selection tag. And then we want to do outside faces. That will be outside of the wall. Click on that, and it gives us another selection tag. And that way, so if I bring my material over, and this is what I want to be the outside, I look for my outside faces, I'll click back on my material, I drag my selection tag under selection. Actually, let me redo that again. I'm not sure if you guys can see it down there. Let me pull up attribute window. Here we go. All right, so I have my material selected, and you see here where it says selection. Grab my selection tag, bring it here, and now that's going to affect our outside faces. Let's come back over to object. I'm going to click colorize fragments off so we can see our textures. So now that's our outside texture. And I'm going to drag this inside rock texture that I made out of all these numbers here. I'm going to click on this and bring our inside selection tag over. And now you can see whenever I run my simulation, everything that's inside is going to have that inside texture there. So let's do a UV map. Let's make it cubic. We knock it down 25, 25. And you can see in here now, let me hit render real quick. What happened there? Oh yeah, you know why? Because I didn't take my display tags here and change the visibility. So I'm gonna just click and drag, go to my attributes window, and over here where it says visibility, use 0% visibility. Now whenever I render, we should be able to see our wall. See, just moving a little bit. Yeah, so that's how you texture the inside of the wall, and then you also texture the outside of the wall. And that way, you know, if you're working on a brick wall, you can add different levels of realism to it. And so that'll be it for this video here. I hope you guys liked it. I hope I explained it well enough for you guys. And then on the next video, I'm going to show you guys how to bring it together with XParticles. Now we can have XParticles actually react to the way that the wall is breaking. That way we can add little pieces of rubble falling and everything. And then on the last part of the video, we're going to just add like a guy from Mixamo. We're going to have him come in, kick the wall, and then just finish up texturing and rendering it out for After Effects. So make sure you guys join us for part 2. Again, I thank you guys for watching this video. Like, leave me a comment if you didn't understand anything. I'll make up a follow video if that's the case. And then as always, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you for part 2.